بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه هداه أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this session of Maxims of Fiqh. We're still discussing the general maxims that fall under the grand maxim, implementing speech takes precedence over neglecting the speech. We will begin with a maxim that is an exception of the grand maxim. Scholars say if implementing speech is impossible, then it is neglected. إذا تعذر إعمال الكلام يهمل. Whenever it is impossible to implement the speech, then it is neglected. An example for this would be when someone says something and this word that he mentioned, it has two different meanings, two opposite meanings that he did not indicate which one of them is the one that he intended. Then in that case, we cannot implement that speech. And whenever he says something that contradicts reality, this also is neglected. An example for this would be when someone says, I killed so and so, and he mentions the name of a person. We check and we find that this person is alive. We don't try this person for the capital murder. Why? This man is already alive. Or when he says, I chopped the hand of my neighbor, and he names his neighbor. We check on his neighbor and we find that his hand is safe. He has both hands. So there is nothing wrong. In this case, we neglect this speech. In principle, we should implement speech as much as possible. But here, it is impossible. A husband telling his wife that she is divorced 4, and she tells him 3 is the limit. 3 is enough. Why you are adding one more? He tells her, you know what, then this one more goes to my other wife. He said that. Does his other wife divorce? Scholars said no, because this is useless speech that is not implemented. Why it is not implemented? Here in this case, when this extra divorce did not apply to his first wife, it is also not applied to his second wife. So this maxim is an exception of the original maxim, the grand maxim, implementing speech takes precedence. The second maxim that we have as a general maxim goes underneath the grand maxim is that mentioning part of what cannot be proportioned is like mentioning the whole. Mentioning part of what cannot be proportioned is like mentioning the whole. When you mention something and that thing is part of a larger thing and we cannot separate them, then it is as if you are mentioning everything. An example for this, if you say to someone, I guarantee this person half of him. This person is wanted for a murder, for a punishment, and you guarantee half of him. It's like guaranteeing all of him, because we cannot cut this person in half, for instance. Another example would be if someone told his wife that he is divorcing her hand. He told his wife that your hand is divorced. His wife totally is divorced. Why? Because we don't separate the hand of the wife and we say that this is divorced. However, scholars differed when he tells the wife that part of her that could be separated is divorced, like her hair, for instance, or her nails. Here, scholars differed. Now, remember, these statements should not be said, because the Muslim always uses what is useful. But in case, just in case, something like that happened, then we look and check, can we implement the speech? If it is implemented, then we say it has an influence. Another example would be if he divorced his wife, half divorce. In Islam, we have 1 divorce, 2 or 3. We don't have half. So all scholars agreed that if he divorced his wife part, then the entire thing is counted. It's counted as 1. That's what scholars agreed on. Just like in the prayer, Maghrib prayer, it cannot be shortened. Why? Because we don't have 1.5. So it remained the same. While the 4, we do have 2. So again, here mentioning part of what cannot be proportioned is like mentioning the whole. The third general maxim is that description in the presence is null and in the absence is counted and considered. الوصف في الحاضر لغو وفي الغائب معتبر. When you describe something that is present, your description is null. This is a maxim, again, that is an exception of the grand maxim. Why? Because whenever there is something is present, the vision is what counts, not the description. For instance, you want to sell someone a car. There is a car, and the color of that car is green. You tell him, I am selling you this red car, and you pointed to the car. The car is green, not red, but he described it as red, and you said, I agree. Then you came later and you said, I don't want this car. This is not the car I wanted. I wanted the red car. There was no red car. Here, scholars in general, they agreed that the sale is final. Why? Because it was present. It was present. The sale, any description in presence, that is null. Why? It's in front of you. You check it. You look at it. And that is sufficient. When do we count the description? When there is an item or there is something that is absent. Here, we count the description, whether it is valid or no. Some scholars said describing part of something similar is sufficient. Earlier, they used to build the houses with equal rooms. Describing one room, that would be sufficient for the entire house. But now this has changed. So there has to be accurate description. As long as the item or the merchandise is absent, then the description counts. But if the item is available, then the description is null and the transaction is valid. These are some of the maxims, the general maxims that go under the grand maxim. Implementing the speech takes precedence over neglecting it. There are other maxims also. After that, we will move to the general maxims that they don't fall under any of the grand maxims. They are by themselves separate because we cannot include them in one of those 6 maxims. Each one of them has a separate meaning and a separate ruling with other implementations and other examples. That will be, inshallah, the discussion of the next session. I will stop here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.